Have you ever experienced something so strange, so unexplainable, that it made you wonder if we are living in some sort of simulation? A glitch in the system, perhaps. It's a thought that crosses many minds after hearing stories about objects vanishing, strange coincidences, or bizarre occurrences that defy logic. In today's video, we're diving into some chilling, real-life accounts of what people believe to be glitches in the Matrix. Those eerie moments that make you question the very fabric of reality. Story 1. The Vanishing Ring. Let's begin with a story that, on the surface, might seem simple. But sometimes, the most mysterious things can come from the smallest, most meaningful moments. This one involves a wedding ring, an object that represents love, commitment, and memories. Imagine this. A woman, let's call her Sarah, was at home on a quiet evening preparing dinner. The soft hum of her kitchen filled the air, and the smell of garlic and onions started to dance around the room. She reached for the spice rack and began to stir the simmering pot of soup. As she did, she absent-mindedly glanced down at her hand. And that's when it hit her. Her wedding ring was gone. At first, she thought nothing of it. Perhaps it had simply slipped off, as it sometimes did when her hands were wet from washing dishes. She immediately turned to the sink, thinking maybe it had fallen off there. She pulled out the dish rack, checked the pipes, and even ran her fingers along the edge of the sink, just in case. But the ring wasn't there. She walked over to the couch, where she had been sitting earlier, and slipped her hand between the cushions. Nothing. She checked the floor, the carpet, and even peeked behind the couch, all in vain. It wasn't just about losing an item. It was about losing something that had so much sentimental value. That ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a decade-long relationship, the vows she had exchanged, and the memories that had come with them. Sarah grew frustrated, but not giving up. She retraced her steps from that afternoon. She remembered taking it off briefly to wash her hands before she began cooking. But she couldn't recall where she had placed it afterward. Her thoughts raced. Had she put it down somewhere, forgotten it, and somehow never noticed? Her mind couldn't piece the puzzle together. Hours went by, and after searching high and low, Sarah gave up, disheartened. She wasn't sure if it was just a case of forgetfulness or something more mysterious. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ring had vanished into thin air. But time passed, and like most people do when something feels lost beyond recovery, she let it go. Days turned into weeks. Sarah adjusted to life without her ring. She carried on, her daily routine unchanged, though a small part of her felt the absence. But one evening, 2 weeks later, while she was tidying up the house, something strange happened. Sarah was cleaning out a drawer in her study, a drawer she hadn't touched in years. It was one of those drawers that just gathered odds and ends, old receipts, paperwork she'd forgotten about, and random notes. As she went through the stack, something shiny caught her eye. At first, she assumed it was just another loose coin or piece of jewelry, but as she reached for it, her heart skipped a beat. There, nestled on top of the old receipts, was her wedding ring. Exactly where she hadn't expected it to be. It was sitting there so calmly, as though it had never left her finger in the first place. The sensation was surreal. Her mind raced back to all the places she had searched, all the hours she had spent looking for it. How could it have disappeared and reappeared so effortlessly, without explanation? She hadn't seen that drawer in years. It was as if the universe had played a game with her, pulling a trick on her, just to see how she would react. It was as though time itself had looped back, a small glitch in her personal reality. And yet, when she held the ring in her hands again, there was no clear answer. There was no way to explain it, no rational reasoning that could make sense of the sudden return of something that had been missing for so long. Sarah stood there for a long moment, holding the ring and staring at it, wondering if perhaps there was something bigger at play. Was it all just a coincidence? A simple case of forgetfulness? Or had the universe decided to throw her a curveball, testing her patience and her belief in the strange, inexplicable mysteries of life? In that moment, she wasn't sure what to think. But what she did know, as she placed the ring back on her finger, was that some things in life can't be easily explained. Some things simply vanish, only to reappear when you least expect them. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, you might just experience a glitch in the matrix, a shift in reality, no bigger than the ring that had vanished and reappeared, but enough to make you pause, look around, and wonder if there's more to this world than meets the eye. Conclusion. Stories like Sarah's remind us that life is full of moments that we can't always make sense of. Sometimes, we're left with only questions and no answers. But it's these stories, the strange, the unexplainable, that keep us wondering, keep us dreaming, and keep us open to the possibility that the universe might be much stranger than we realize. Perhaps, just maybe, we're all living in a reality that's not as fixed as we think. And every so often, a little glitch in the matrix might just show us the way. Story 2. The Disappearing Keys. Sometimes, the smallest things can lead to the most unsettling experiences. And that's exactly what happened to a man named Daniel, one ordinary morning, as he was preparing to head out to work. It started like any other day. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden light through the window. Daniel had woken up to the familiar sound of his alarm, rubbed his eyes, and started his morning routine. He quickly got dressed, grabbed a quick bite for breakfast, and made sure everything was in order for the day ahead. But as he was about to leave, something unusual happened. Daniel reached into his pocket for his car keys, the small metal keychain, a familiar weight he was used to carrying around. But his hand closed around nothing. He checked his other pocket. Still nothing. His mind immediately went into panic mode. Where are they? He thought. He turned around and retraced his steps, pacing back through the kitchen, the hallway, and his living room. He checked the counter where he usually placed his keys when he came home the night before. Empty. He looked under the couch cushions, just in case they had slipped there. He even checked the kitchen counter again, running his fingers along the surface, as if somehow they might have materialized out of thin air. Minutes turned into an hour as Daniel searched frantically. He checked every room in his apartment, every drawer, every surface. It was as if his keys had simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. A sense of frustration and unease began to rise within him. How could something so important, something so small, simply disappear? He thought back to when he last saw them, just the night before. He remembered putting them on the counter after returning home from a late meeting. He had been so careful. So how could they be gone? He continued to search, even calling his partner to see if perhaps they had accidentally moved them. No luck. His mind raced with possibilities. Had someone taken them? Had he misplaced them so thoroughly that he couldn't even remember where? The clock ticked on, and with each passing minute, his frustration grew. His mind started to question everything. Could it be some strange twist of fate? Or maybe, just maybe, his keys had somehow vanished into thin air. But that didn't make sense. Surely, he thought, it was just a moment of forgetfulness. Though it didn't feel like that. Not at all. After an hour of searching, Daniel was forced to give up. The keys simply weren't anywhere. He had wasted so much time looking that he knew he was now going to be late for work. With a sigh, he grabbed his bag, locked the door behind him, and left the apartment keyless. The day passed in a blur. Daniel tried to put the incident out of his mind, focusing on his work. But the unease lingered in the back of his thoughts, like an itch he couldn't scratch. He couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had happened. How could his keys have just disappeared like that? Where could they have gone? That evening, as the sun began to set and the quiet of the night settled in, Daniel came home, tired from the day's work. He plopped his bag on the couch and began to relax. The thought of the missing keys still gnawed at him. As he prepared for bed, he reached into his jacket pocket for a tissue, expecting to find nothing unusual. But as his hand closed around the fabric, something unexpected happened. Out fell his car keys, exactly where he had checked them earlier that morning. His heart skipped a beat. He stared at them for a moment, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. How could the keys have been in his jacket pocket all this time, when he had checked it earlier, so thoroughly, so carefully? He remembered the panic he had felt, the hours he spent searching every nook and cranny of his apartment. And yet, here they were, as if they had simply materialized out of nowhere. For a moment, Daniel just stood there in silence, his mind racing. He didn't know whether to laugh or feel disturbed. Had he missed them somehow? Had he overlooked them in his frantic search? Or was it something else entirely, something beyond explanation, something that felt wrong? As he sat down on the bed, keys in hand, the weight of the moment lingered in his mind. Some people might call it coincidence, a simple case of forgetfulness or absent-mindedness. But for others, this story, the keys that vanished only to reappear after he had completely given up, was nothing short of a glitch in the matrix. It was a reminder that sometimes reality itself can feel a little off-kilter. The smallest of things, like a set of car keys, can vanish and reappear in ways that defy logic, leaving you wondering whether the world you see around you is truly as fixed as it seems. Daniel couldn't shake the thought. Was there something bigger at play here? Or had he simply been caught up in the strange magic of an ordinary day? Either way, one thing was for sure. Sometimes, when you least expect it, the universe has a way of messing with your perception of reality. As he laid down to sleep, the keys sitting silently on his nightstand, Daniel couldn't help but wonder how many other things in life had vanished, only to return, leaving him none the wiser. And so, he drifted off to sleep, the strange feeling still lingering, knowing that the world might not be as solid, as predictable as he once thought. Conclusion: some stories, like Daniel's, make us question the very nature of reality. What's the explanation for objects disappearing, only to return when we've given up? Is it simply coincidence? Or are there glitches in our reality that we don't fully understand? Whatever the case, these strange occurrences remind us that sometimes life has a way of keeping us on our toes, leaving us to wonder if the rules we live by are really as fixed as they seem. Story 3. The Unfinished Phone Call. Sometimes, the strangest experiences happen when you least expect them. The kind of occurrences that leave you questioning the very nature of reality. This is one such story. One that involves a phone call that seemed to vanish into thin air. It began one evening when a woman, let's call her Emily, was relaxing at home after a long day. She had just finished preparing dinner and was enjoying the quiet solitude of her apartment. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of the wind outside, and the comforting warmth of her living room made it feel like a peaceful night. Then, the phone rang. It was her mother. Emily picked it up, as she always did. They chatted for a few minutes, discussing the usual family matters, plans for the weekend, little things that only mothers and daughters talk about. It was an ordinary conversation, nothing unusual. When they hung up, everything seemed normal. Emily set the phone down, continuing on with her evening, never thinking twice about the call. The next day, as Emily went about her routine, she received another call. This time, it was from her mother again. Emily answered, smiling as she expected another conversation just like the one they had the night before. But when she said hello, her mother's voice came through, puzzled. "Why didn't you answer my call yesterday?" she asked. "I called you, and you didn't pick up." Emily, taken aback, looked at her phone in confusion. "What do you mean?" "We just spoke last night." Her mother insisted that there had been no call. "I called you around the same time, but you didn't pick up. You didn't leave me a voicemail either." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She was certain they had just spoken the night before. Yet, as she checked her phone, she couldn't find any evidence of that call. No missed call notification, no voicemail, nothing. It was as if the phone call had never happened. She felt a creeping unease settle in. Had it been a mistake? Had she somehow imagined the conversation? But no, the memory of it was too vivid. They had spoken. She had heard her mother's voice, clear as day. But where was the proof? The phone log was empty. And it wasn't just Emily. As the days passed, she began to hear more stories from people around her who had experienced something eerily similar. One friend told her about a strange experience of their own. This person had received a call from their best friend, only to have the conversation fade into the background of their memory as soon as the call ended. They didn't think much of it until a day later, when their best friend called again, asking why they hadn't responded to the call. Much like Emily, this person checked their call log, but there was nothing, no trace of the conversation that had seemed so real. Another person described how they had a lengthy conversation with a relative, but when they checked their phone later, it was as if that call had never occurred. No missed call, no record of the call, not even a blip in their phone's history. Yet, the conversation itself felt as though it had truly happened. The more people Emily talked to, the more she realized that these experiences were happening to more than just herself. Others had felt the same eerie sense of confusion, as if they had spoken to someone on the phone, only to have the call vanish, leaving them with nothing but the memory of it, a memory that didn't seem to match the evidence on their phones. Emily couldn't help but wonder, was it just a glitch? A technical malfunction with the phone system, some weird error that caused calls to be erased from call logs. But then, as she sat there in her quiet apartment, she felt the weight of it. This didn't feel like a simple glitch. There was something more to it, something deeper. Was it possible that she had experienced something outside the realm of ordinary technology? A glitch in the matrix, perhaps? A momentary break in the continuity of reality itself? As the days went by, Emily's mind continued to turn over the events, unable to let them go. Each time she thought about the missing phone call, a sense of unease washed over her. She tried to explain it away with rational thoughts, a technical glitch, a malfunction, a mix-up in the phone system. But deep down, she knew that something far more profound might have happened. She began to wonder, how often do we go about our days, assuming everything is in its proper place, only to find that reality can sometimes betray us in the most subtle ways? And what if these little moments, these strange glitches, are just the beginning, signs of something bigger at play? Conclusion: sometimes it's the smallest, most unassuming moments that leave the biggest impact. And in Emily's case, the mysterious disappearance of a phone call left her wondering if there are parts of our reality that are simply out of our control, slipping through the cracks when we least expect it. Was it just a phone glitch, or something much more profound? Maybe, just maybe, these unexplainable moments are glimpses of something beyond our understanding, a reminder that reality might not always be as solid as it seems. Story 4. The Reappearing Pen. It's often the small, seemingly insignificant things that have the power to truly drive us crazy. We're so accustomed to the everyday routine that when something out of place happens, it throws us off balance. One such story involves a man named Jack, who found himself in the middle of one of these baffling moments. Jack worked as an office manager at a quiet company, a place that was usually filled with the low hum of computer keyboards and the soft shuffle of papers. His desk was his sanctuary, a place where he could focus and get his work done without too many distractions. It was an ordinary Monday morning when this strange event unfolded. He was sitting at his desk, going over some notes for an upcoming meeting, when he reached for his pen, a sleek, silver ballpoint pen that he had used for years. It was his favorite pen, the one he always had on hand, the one that made writing feel effortless. Jack placed it carefully on the edge of his desk, just to the right of his keyboard, within easy reach. He continued working, typing up a few emails, taking a sip of coffee, and humming along to the rhythm of his usual workday. But a few minutes later, when he went to grab the pen, it was gone. At first, he thought maybe he had moved it, or perhaps it had rolled off the desk without him noticing. But as he scanned the surface of the desk, he saw that it wasn't anywhere in sight. Confused, Jack leaned back in his chair, looking around the room. He checked under the desk, expecting it to have fallen there. Nothing. He moved his chair aside and peered into his drawer, rifling through the papers and files that usually piled up there. Still, no pen. Frustration began to settle in. He checked his coat pockets, the space beside his computer, and even glanced under the piles of paperwork on the other side of the desk. But the pen had vanished without a trace. His mind couldn't grasp it. It wasn't like him to misplace things, especially something as noticeable as a pen. And yet, there it was, completely gone. Did someone take it? He wondered. He glanced around at his coworkers, but everyone seemed absorbed in their own work. No one was even near his desk when he had placed the pen there. Jack let out a sigh, irritated and perplexed, but he reluctantly gave up his search for the time being. Maybe it had been an accident. Perhaps the pen had just rolled off the desk and landed in some spot he hadn't yet thought to check. For the next few days, Jack couldn't stop thinking about it. The more he tried to forget about the missing pen, the more it nagged at him. He retraced his steps in his mind, trying to figure out if he had done something that could explain it. But there was no logical explanation. The pen simply wasn't there. A week passed, and the mystery of the disappearing pen was slowly fading from his thoughts, until one afternoon, when he was cleaning out the back of his desk drawer, preparing to reorganize and tidy up a bit. As he shifted through a stack of old papers and unused stationery, something caught his eye. There, lying underneath a jumble of crumpled receipts and forgotten files, was his pen, the same silver ballpoint he had searched for so desperately the week before. Jack blinked and paused for a moment, staring at the pen in disbelief. How could it have gotten there? He had checked this very drawer multiple times. He had carefully examined every corner of that space, even the deepest parts of the drawer where items often slipped out of sight. But the pen hadn't been there, not once. And yet now, it was lying in the most obvious place, as though it had always been there. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Had it somehow slipped behind other papers in the drawer during his search? Maybe, but he didn't think so. It didn't feel like a simple case of misplacement. It felt otherworldly, as though the pen had been playing some strange game with him, appearing and disappearing at will, only to return once he had completely stopped looking for it. Jack held the pen in his hand, running his fingers along its sleek surface. It was the same pen, the one that had disappeared without a trace days ago. It was as though the universe itself had decided to play a trick on him. He could almost feel the weight of it, the absurdity of the situation. Was it just a coincidence, a product of an absent-minded search? Or had something more unusual been at play? He tried to brush it off, convinced it was just a fluke, but something deep inside him couldn't shake the eerie feeling. There was a part of him that wondered if this little pen was somehow a symbol, a sign that reality wasn't as fixed as it seemed, that the small moments, the insignificant details, might hold the key to something far stranger than we realize. Was it just a lost pen? Or had he witnessed a glitch in his reality, one that made him question the very nature of what's real and what isn't? Jack couldn't be sure, but as he placed the pen back on his desk, he couldn't help but smile at the thought. Sometimes, the universe has a way of making you wonder whether it's toying with you, just a little. Conclusion: it's strange, isn't it? The smallest things, like a pen, can sometimes leave the biggest impressions. When something vanishes and then reappears in a place you've already searched, it can feel like reality itself has been bent, if only for a moment. Was it just a fluke? Or was there something more at play? Stories like this remind us that even in our everyday lives, we may experience small but profound glitches in our reality, moments that make us pause and wonder if the world is truly as solid as it seems. Story 5. The Time Loop. Sometimes, life has a funny way of playing with our perception of time, twisting it in ways we can't quite understand. And that's exactly what happened to a man named Ben. One ordinary morning, when he found himself caught in what seemed like an impossible moment. It all started with a rush. Ben had woken up late, as he often did, and was already behind schedule. His alarm had failed to go off, and he had barely enough time to throw on some clothes and grab a quick breakfast before heading out the door. He was running late for work, the kind of day where everything seems to go wrong from the start. In his hurry, he grabbed his keys, slammed the door behind him, and rushed to his car, hoping he could make up for the lost time on the road. As he sped through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic, he realized something that made his heart skip a beat. He had forgotten his wallet at home. Great, Ben thought to himself. This is just perfect. He turned around, feeling frustrated but knowing he had no choice but to go back and retrieve it. The morning was already off to a bad start, but maybe if he just got the wallet, things could still be salvaged. When he arrived back at his apartment, he parked the car and quickly made his way inside. He opened the door and stepped into his living room. Everything was exactly as he had left it just moments ago. The coffee mug still sat on the table. The mail was scattered across the counter, and the couch cushions were slightly askew from where he had left them that morning. Ben walked toward the counter, expecting to grab his wallet, but as he looked down, his eyes widened in disbelief. There it was, his wallet, sitting neatly on the counter, exactly where he had left it before he rushed out the door. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He thought maybe he was seeing things. But no, the wallet was there. He remembered walking out of his apartment earlier, distinctly remembering that he had left without it. He had even checked his pockets before he got into the car, confirming that it wasn't with him. So how was it now sitting on the counter, as if it had always been there? Ben's mind began to race. He stepped back, trying to make sense of it. Had he somehow missed it before? He double-checked every room, thinking maybe he had grabbed it and forgotten about it in his rush. He searched the living room, the kitchen, even the bathroom, but no, the wallet hadn't been anywhere. It was only when he came back, after driving all the way to work and turning around, that it had appeared. It didn't make sense. How could it be there when he was so sure it wasn't earlier? He couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening, like time itself had somehow bent, looping back to give him the opportunity to pick up the wallet he had forgotten. He had never experienced anything like this before. Was it a trick of his mind? Or had he unknowingly stepped into a moment where time had folded in on itself? Ben felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard of time loops before. Stories where people relived the same moments over and over, unable to break free from the cycle. But this wasn't like that. It wasn't a matter of repeating the same moment. It was as if time had simply reset. He tried to reason with himself. Maybe he had somehow missed the wallet when he first left. But the more he thought about it, the more impossible that seemed. The memory of walking out without it, the rush to the car, the frustration of realizing he had forgotten it, it all felt too real to be a mistake. And yet, here it was, as if the universe had given him a second chance to retrieve it, as if time had reset, giving him a moment to fix what he had overlooked. Ben stood there, staring at the wallet on the counter, lost in his thoughts. Was it possible he had stepped into some sort of time loop, even if only for a moment? Had the world shifted for just a fraction of a second, allowing him to recover what he had forgotten? Or was it all just a strange, unexplainable coincidence? No answers came. Only the eerie sensation that something had happened, something that could not be fully explained by logic or reason. He couldn't shake the feeling that reality had played a little trick on him, something beyond his control. Conclusion. Sometimes, we experience moments that feel just a little too strange to be explained. A second chance, a reset, a small glitch in the flow of time, whatever it was, Ben couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to it than meets the eye. Was it a time loop? Or was it something else? Something beyond our understanding of time and space? The world around us often feels so certain, so fixed, but every once in a while, something happens that makes us question everything. Maybe, just maybe, there are moments where time bends, if only for a brief moment, and we're left to wonder if we really understand the nature of the world we live in. As Ben walked out the door again, this time with his wallet in hand, he couldn't help but smile. Life had a way of surprising him, even in the most ordinary of moments. Story 6. The Double Encounter. Have you ever met someone, only to feel like you've known them from somewhere, a place or time that doesn't quite make sense? It's the kind of experience that leaves you questioning reality, wondering if you've crossed some invisible boundary in time, or if perhaps there's more to the world around us than we can understand. This is exactly what happened to a woman named Clara one crisp autumn afternoon, as she was strolling through a peaceful park near her home. The sun had just begun to dip beneath the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow across the trees. It was the kind of evening where the world seemed to pause, where everything felt still and calm. Clara was enjoying the tranquility, taking in the fresh air and the rustling of the leaves, when something caught her eye. A man was sitting on a bench nearby, his face turned towards the setting sun. At first, she didn't think much of it. After all, it was a public park, and people were out enjoying the evening just like her. But then, as she walked past, something stopped her in her tracks. There was something about him, something so familiar, as though she had seen him before. It wasn't just his face, but the way he carried himself, the way he looked at her as she passed. She felt a strange tug in her chest, a sense of recognition, as though she was seeing a long-lost friend after years apart. Curious, Clara approached him. He looked up as she drew near, and a smile spread across his face. "Hello," he said warmly, his voice kind and familiar. "Hi," Clara replied, hesitating for a moment. "I'm sorry, but I feel like I know you from somewhere." The man raised an eyebrow in mild surprise, then chuckled softly. "I don't think so," he said, "but it's funny you mention it. You look very familiar to me too." They exchanged pleasantries, and soon they were deep in conversation. They spoke about everything from the weather to their favorite books. He was easy to talk to, and for Clara, it felt as though they had known each other for years, as though they had shared countless moments together, but she couldn't place when or where. There was a peculiar warmth in his words, a sense of comfort that only comes from knowing someone intimately. After a few minutes, they said their goodbyes, and Clara continued on her walk, the conversation lingering in her mind. But as she walked further away, a strange thought began to gnaw at her. There was something off about the encounter, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It was as if the meeting hadn't been entirely real, as though it had happened in some other time, some other place, and she was only now remembering it. The feeling lingered for days. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the man, and the more she thought about him, the more convinced she became that they had met before, in another life or perhaps in some other reality. She tried to dismiss the feeling as just a trick of her mind, but deep down, she couldn't shake the sense of knowing him. Then, just a few days later, Clara returned to the park, hoping to clear her mind. The sun was setting again, casting the same golden glow across the park, and there, sitting on the same bench, was the man. This time, she felt a sense of certainty. She knew him, and this time, she would find out why. As she approached, her heart began to race. This would be the moment she would get the answers she had been looking for. "Hi again," she said, smiling as she walked towards him. "I know this might sound strange, but I'm sure we've met before. We talked the other day, right?" The man turned to look at her, his expression changing in an instant. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition, but then it was gone, replaced by confusion. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I don't think so. I don't remember meeting you." Clara was taken aback. No memory of it. She was certain they had spoken. The conversation was still fresh in her mind. The words they had exchanged, the way he had smiled at her. She even recalled the details of their talk, the mention of their favorite books, the light laughter they had shared. She was about to press further when he spoke again, his tone polite but firm. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we've ever met." Clara's mind raced. She tried to explain, telling him how they had talked just a few days ago in the same park. She even mentioned the details of their conversation, but he only looked at her with increasing confusion. His face was kind, but there was no recognition there. It was as though he had never seen her before, never spoken to her in his life. The strange feeling in Clara's chest grew stronger. She felt as though she were standing in two places at once, as if time itself had somehow bent, allowing her to experience two versions of reality. One in which she had met the man, and another in which they were strangers. Confused and unsettled, Clara walked away. The entire encounter felt unreal. Had she somehow imagined their conversation the first time? Was it all a product of her mind, weaving a story that didn't truly exist? Or had she experienced something far stranger? Something like a time overlap, where a version of herself from another reality had met this man before. It was a question she couldn't answer, but the feeling lingered, like an unspoken riddle that tugged at her soul. Conclusion. Sometimes, we encounter moments that leave us wondering if the fabric of reality itself is more fragile than we think. Is it possible to meet someone, only to have time or memory play tricks on us, creating a double encounter, one that feels real but never truly happened? Clara's story serves as a reminder that, in a world as vast and mysterious as ours, some things simply don't make sense. And every now and then, we might just catch a glimpse of something that isn't supposed to be, something that makes us question the very nature of our existence. Perhaps, just once in a while, we all experience a little glitch in the matrix, a moment where time, memory, and reality blur together, leaving us wondering if we've lived this moment before, or if it was meant to happen in some other time. Story 7. The Flashing Light. There are moments in life when we notice something strange, something small and seemingly insignificant, that makes us question the very fabric of reality. It could be a flicker of light, a sound in the distance, or a feeling that lingers even after the moment has passed. Sometimes, these little anomalies go unnoticed, dismissed as nothing more than coincidence. But what if they're more than that? What if they're trying to tell us something? This is the story of a man named Thomas, and the strange experience he had with a flickering light that would not let him go. It started on an ordinary evening, late one night, when Thomas was sitting in his living room. The house was quiet, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves outside as the wind passed through the trees. He had just finished his work for the day and was unwinding, flipping through the channels on the TV, when he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Above the couch, the light overhead, a simple ceiling lamp, began to flicker. At first, Thomas thought it was just a dying bulb, one of those annoying little quirks that happens from time to time. But as he stared at the light, it began to blink in an odd sequence. A quick flash, followed by a pause, then another blink, a little longer this time. The pattern was irregular but repetitive, like it was trying to communicate something. But what? Thomas shook his head, trying to brush it off. Probably just a loose connection, he thought, still half watching the TV. But the more he watched the light, the more it felt like there was something deliberate about the way it flickered, as though it was following a rhythm, a sequence. It didn't seem random at all. He reached up and flicked the switch, turning the light off. But as soon as he did, a cold shiver ran down his spine. For just a moment, the darkness in the room felt too thick, almost suffocating. He quickly turned the light back on, and there it was again, that strange, rhythmic flicker. Thomas felt an uneasy sensation creep up his neck, but he shrugged it off as his imagination getting the better of him. It was late after all. Maybe he was just tired. But even as he tried to ignore it, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that there was something more to this. The next day, the flickering light was still on his mind. As he went about his day, he tried to push it out of his thoughts, but something kept drawing him back to it. That evening, as he was getting ready for bed, Thomas noticed that the same strange pattern was happening again. But this time, it wasn't just the living room light. The light above his kitchen table began to flicker, its rhythm matching the one in the living room. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but as he stood there, watching both lights flicker in perfect synchrony, he couldn't ignore the odd pattern. The lights were blinking in a very deliberate sequence, almost like a code. It felt too purposeful to be a coincidence. Was this just a random electrical fault, or was something more happening? The lights had never flickered like this before, and now it was happening in more than one room, across different times of day. No matter where Thomas went in his house, he would catch glimpses of the same strange flickering. The hallway light, the bathroom light, the lamp in his bedroom, they all flickered at different times, but always in that same rhythmic, almost hypnotic pattern. It was as if the lights were trying to send him a message. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. Was it a malfunction of the electrical system? Perhaps, but that didn't explain the consistency, the fact that the lights were flickering in the same pattern. Thomas began to feel as though his house itself was trying to tell him something, but he couldn't understand what. Days passed, and the flickering continued. It seemed like it was happening more often now, and the rhythm was becoming harder to ignore. The lights in his house were no longer just objects. They felt like a presence, something watching him, communicating with him in a way he couldn't quite grasp. One evening, Thomas stood in the middle of his living room, staring up at the light above his head as it flickered in that same odd rhythm. He closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. "It's just a light," he whispered. "It's just a light." But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something about this experience wasn't just about faulty wiring. It felt like reality itself was bending, shifting in ways he couldn't understand. Was it a glitch? Or was something more sinister at work? That night, Thomas lay in bed, wide awake, the rhythmic flicker of the lights still echoing in his mind. He couldn't help but wonder, was it possible that the lights were trying to communicate something to him? Something he wasn't meant to understand? Or had he simply become fixated on something trivial, allowing it to grow into something far more unsettling? The questions lingered unanswered as the night stretched on. Conclusion: sometimes the smallest things, like a flickering light, can make us question the very nature of reality. Are they just random coincidences? Or are they signs of something more? Perhaps, in moments like these, we are given a glimpse into the strange and unexplained, a reminder that the world around us may not always be as solid as we believe. For Thomas, the flickering lights continued to haunt him, an eerie reminder that reality itself may have its own way of speaking, its own language, if only we could decipher it. Story 8: The Vanishing Ticket. It's the little things that often leave the biggest impression. We go about our daily lives, assuming that everything is in its place, and yet sometimes a small object can play the strangest trick on us, one that leaves us questioning whether reality is as fixed as we think. This is the story of a young man named Alex, who experienced just such a trick with something as ordinary as a train ticket. It began on a bright and breezy morning, as Alex boarded the train for a trip to the city. He had everything in order, or so he thought. He purchased his ticket from the vending machine, folded it neatly, and placed it carefully in his wallet, just as he always did. The train ride itself was uneventful. The rhythmic sound of the tracks, the soft hum of conversations around him, and the occasional jolt of the train as it passed through stations. Alex settled into his seat, took out his phone, and began to pass the time. After a while, Alex noticed something strange. He reached for his wallet to check the time, and when he opened it, the ticket was gone. He furrowed his brow, thinking it must have fallen out. But after searching through his bag, his pockets, and even checking under the seat where he had been sitting, there was no sign of the ticket. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. Alex felt a wave of frustration wash over him. How could he have misplaced it? The ticket had been right there, in his wallet, just a few minutes ago. He retraced his steps in his mind, trying to remember where he might have dropped it. But no matter how hard he thought, there was no logical explanation. The more he searched, the more certain he became that the ticket was lost for good. With a sigh, he resigned himself to the situation. He'd have to buy another ticket. He reached into his pocket and, after a brief pause, bought a second ticket for the remainder of the journey. The rest of the ride passed without incident, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had just happened. The missing ticket wasn't just an accident. It felt like something beyond his control, like an object had simply disappeared, leaving him with no answers. The next day, after returning home from his trip, Alex started unpacking his wallet. As he flipped it open to remove a few receipts and spare change, he froze. There, sitting neatly in the very same spot where he had left it, was the missing ticket. It was as though it had never disappeared in the first place. Alex stared at it, his mind racing. How could it have reappeared in his wallet? He had checked every corner of his bag and his pockets, even retracing every step he had taken during his journey. There was no way he could have missed it. And yet, there it was, the ticket, as if it had simply materialized overnight. He double-checked everything, even pulling out other receipts and cards from his wallet to make sure he wasn't mistaken. But there was no doubt about it. The ticket had been gone for a full 24 hours, only to return as if time had rewound itself. Was it simply a mistake? A lapse in memory, perhaps? He had searched for hours after the initial disappearance, convinced he had lost it for good. But there was no explanation for how it had reappeared so suddenly, so perfectly in place, when he had already given up all hope of finding it. The more Alex thought about it, the stranger the whole situation became. Could it have been a coincidence? Perhaps the ticket had slipped into another part of his wallet or bag without him noticing. But the idea that it simply vanished, only to reappear when he least expected it, left him with a lingering unease. There was something odd about the entire experience, something that didn't quite fit into the logic of the world around him. The more he tried to rationalize it, the more the thought nagged at him. What happened during those missing hours? Had something in his reality shifted? Was it a simple mix-up? Or had he unknowingly stepped into a moment where time itself had subtly bent, allowing him to recover something that had been lost? Conclusion. Sometimes, the smallest occurrences can make us question the nature of reality itself. We go about our days, unaware that the world around us might not always be as it seems. The ticket that vanished and reappeared, was it a coincidence? Or was it something more? A glitch in the fabric of time, perhaps? Or simply an object playing a trick on Alex's mind? Whatever it was, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something out of the ordinary had just happened, and that, sometimes, even the most ordinary objects can remind us that reality might not be as fixed as we think. Story 9. The phone call from the future expanded. Imagine getting a call from an unknown number in the middle of the night, a call that feels like it shouldn't even be possible. You pick up the phone, and when you hear the voice on the other end, it sounds strangely familiar, like a voice you've heard before, but not quite in the way you'd expect. It's your own voice. This is exactly what happened to one woman, and it all began late one evening, when she was sitting alone in her living room, scrolling through her phone, thinking about the big decision she had made earlier that day. She had just accepted a job offer in a new city, leaving behind everything she knew. It was a thrilling but terrifying choice, and she had mixed feelings about it. The phone rang. She looked at the screen, an unknown number. "Hello," she answered, expecting it to be a robocall or some sales pitch. But instead of the usual robotic voice, she heard something that sent a chill down her spine. The voice on the other end was soft, calm, and yet, strangely, familiar. "Hello? Who is this?" she asked again, trying to make sense of the situation. The voice on the other end didn't answer. Instead, it spoke in a way that sent a shiver through her. "You've just made a big decision. But you need to rethink it. You'll be glad you did. It's not too late." The line went dead. Confused and slightly rattled, she stood there, the phone still in her hand. staring at it like it held the answers to a question she hadn't even asked. Who was that? And why did they sound like her? She tried to shake it off. After all, she had just made a life-changing decision, and maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. Maybe it was a prank, or some weird glitch in the system. But she couldn't escape the feeling that something deeper was happening. The next day, the phone rang again. This time, she was already feeling uneasy about the previous night's strange call, but she was determined to brush it off as a coincidence. She answered, her voice shaking just a little. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was exactly the same. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a prank. It was the same calm, measured voice, her voice. The words that followed were even more unsettling than before. "You're about to take a path you can't return from. Think carefully before you do." Her heart raced. What was going on? Who was this? Was she speaking to herself from the future? Or was this something far stranger? The words were haunting, but what struck her most was the eerily specific advice. It was like the voice knew exactly what she was about to do. The woman's mind spun in a whirl of confusion and disbelief. Could it really be possible that she was hearing a message from her future self? A warning, maybe, or a plea for caution? In a daze, she tried to reach out to her family and friends, hoping to find some rational explanation. But no one could offer any comfort. Her friends brushed it off as stress from the big change ahead, while her parents thought it was just an odd coincidence. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far beyond the ordinary was happening. As the days went by, the phone calls continued. Each one brought more cryptic messages, each more chilling than the last. "You've already crossed a line," one message said. "You can still turn back, but the clock is ticking." At first, she tried to ignore the calls, but they came with such regularity and precision that they began to feel like a part of her life. The future seemed to be speaking to her, nudging her, trying to make her see something she wasn't yet ready to confront. One evening, she stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline, her mind racing. Was she really making the right decision? Was there a deeper meaning to these calls, or was she just losing her mind? What if there was something to it? Something she hadn't yet understood? And then, as if answering her thoughts, the phone rang again. This time, she felt no fear, only a strange sense of acceptance. She answered, her voice steady as she said, "What do you want from me?" The voice on the other end was calm, but there was a tenderness to it, as if it knew how much she had been struggling. "You're stronger than you think," it said. "You've made your choice. Now you must live with it. But remember, you are never alone in this." The call ended, and she sat there, staring at her phone. She didn't know if it was her future self or something else entirely, but in that moment, something shifted. She realized that the decision she had made, no matter how overwhelming or uncertain, was hers to own. The future wasn't set in stone. It was a series of choices, and this was just one step in her journey. The calls stopped after that, but the feeling they left behind never truly faded. And whenever she faced tough decisions in life, she would remember that strange, cryptic voice from the future, and wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was trying to tell her that the path ahead wasn't so much about right or wrong, but about the courage to choose and the wisdom to live with it.